All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something that a few of you have been asking about, and that is deleting records from binary files.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that might sound kind of intimidating at first.
Yeah, it sounds very technical.
Right, but once we break it down, it's actually pretty fascinating to see how it works.
Yeah, I think so.
So to help us along the way, we're going to be looking at this YouTube tutorial by Techie Krish from the GEG Agra channel. Now, here's the twist. The whole tutorial is in Hindi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But don't worry, we got your back because expert speaker here is our resident Hindi translator.
That's right. Yeah, I'm happy to help out.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really cool kind of multicultural deep dive today.
It's pretty neat how technology kind of transcends all those boundaries.
It really does,
Well,
yeah. I mean, the
absolutely.
concepts, right, the underlying concepts are universal.
Exactly.
So before we actually get into the deleting records part, let's back up a second and just level set. What exactly are binary files?
So, think of them as how computers store information, especially for things like, your images, photos, music, executable programs, all that kind of stuff. They store it in a very compact way, kind of almost like a secret code, if you will.
Okay.
And it uses just zeros and ones.
Okay, so it's like there are these containers, right? These digital containers for all sorts of data.
Yeah.
And in this tutorial, Techie Krish, he uses the example of student records that are stored in a binary file.
Right.
So each record has things like a roll number and their marks, things like that.
Exactly.
So, what's really interesting here is that deleting a record from a binary file, it's not as simple as you might think.
No.
It's not like hitting the delete key on your keyboard, right? You don't just get rid of it.
No.
It's more about cleverly reorganizing the data.
Exactly.
So you're not really erasing the data itself, but you're basically restructuring the file to exclude the unwanted record.
Yeah, think of it like if you had a train with a bunch of cars. And each of those train cars represents a record in your binary file. And say you wanted to delete a certain car.
Yeah.
Well, you can't just magic it away. What you got to do is you got to disconnect it, right, from the rest of the train, and then reconnect the rest.
Oh, okay.
So you've essentially got a new, shorter train.
I like that visual.
Right.
Yeah, so you're basically taking out the car you don't want and then reconnecting the rest.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to think about it. So Techie Krish shows us, how to do this. He actually walks us through the code.
He does.
Using Python in the video.
Yeah, and what's interesting, of course, is he's doing it in Hindi.
Right.
But, the underlying logic can be applied to any programming language.
Right. So it's almost like we can watch what he's doing, and even if we don't understand the exact words,
Yeah.
we can understand the flow, kind of.
Yeah, it's like watching a cooking show, right?
Right.
In a language you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You can still follow along.
Right, you get the gist.
Yeah, and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy. So, all right, so with a recipe, there are certain steps involved in this.
Right.
So the first thing, what is it? What's the first thing you have to do?
So first, you got to read all the records from your binary file. You read them all, and you store them somewhere else. Kind of like when you're making a recipe, you lay out all your ingredients first.
Oh, so it's like you're making a backup before you start making any changes.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that way, if anything goes wrong, you haven't lost the original information.
Right, right.
Then the program will ask the user, hey, which record do you want to delete?
Okay.
And usually it does that by asking for some kind of unique identifier, like a roll number in this case.
Yes, you got to have a way of telling it which record to remove from the train.
Exactly. You got to give it the criteria
Right.
for selection.
Okay, so then what happens next? So you've identified the record.
Right. So here's where the clever part comes in. So the program uses what's called a loop
Okay.
to go through every single record in that temporary storage space.
A loop. So that's like a repeating action in the code?
Exactly. It's like going down a checklist, right?
Okay,
You're checking each item one by one.
gotcha.
And for each record, the program checks, does this match the one the user wants to delete?
Okay.
If it matches, you skip it, right? Just like, okay, we're not including you.
Yeah.
We're moving on to the next one.
Gotcha.
If it doesn't match, then you add it to a new list.
So you're basically creating a new list that has all of the records except the one that
Exactly.
you want to get rid of.
Exactly. So it's kind of like if you were sorting through your clothes and you were like, okay, these are the ones I want to donate, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You're creating a new pile.
Right, a new pile.
Without the unwanted item.
Okay, I like it.
And then this new list, right? Without the deleted record, that's used to rewrite the original binary file. So the program, it opens the original file, and it basically replaces the contents with this updated list.
Ah, okay.
So instead of deleting the information,
Yeah,
you're strategically overwriting it
I see, yeah.
with the new information.
So it's like hitting save on a document
Exactly.
when you make some changes.
Exactly. You're replacing the old version with the new one.
Okay, that makes sense. That's really clever.
Yeah.
So by rewriting the file,
Right.
he's effectively deleted the record
Exactly.
without actually erasing any data.
Yep.
Physically, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a neat little trick.
Yeah.
And it just highlights how, a lot of times when we talk about data manipulation, it's about restructuring, rearranging, and not necessarily like completely destroying information.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this has big implications for things like data recovery,
Oh, okay.
digital forensics, all those things.
Yeah.
Because, even if something is deleted, right?
Yeah.
A binary file, it might still be possible to retrieve it.
Oh, wow.
Think of it like tearing a page out of a book.
Okay.
You've removed the page, it's gone.
Right.
But maybe there are little, shreds left behind.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's like an imprint on the next page.
Right.
And if you had like, a really skilled investigator,
Yeah.
they might be able to piece together what was on that missing page.
Wow. That's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Think that it's not always as final as we might think.
Exactly. And it really underscores why it's so important to understand, how data is stored, how it's manipulated, especially in today's world,
Right.
where digital information is everything.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You know what I'm also kind of curious about is like, where would you see this being used
Oh, good question.
besides just student records?
Yeah. So think about databases, right?
Okay.
Which are essentially just collections of data, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are organized to make it easy to retrieve information.
Yeah.
So anytime, let's say you delete an entry from a database.
A lot of times that involves, a similar kind of process
Okay.
where instead of actually deleting it, you might mark it as deleted.
Oh, I see.
Or you restructure the way the data is organized to exclude that record.
So it's not just about getting rid of it. It's about like how you manage the data
Yeah.
and keep it
Updated. Exactly, so
Okay.
that everything stays organized and accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And this is important for like everything.
Right.
I mean, you think about, online shopping platforms, you think about financial institutions, healthcare.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it would be chaos if you couldn't manage that data.
It would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't be able to find anything. You wouldn't be able to update anything.
This is making me appreciate how complex this whole thing is.
Oh, yeah. It's very intricate.
And this is happening like all the time, right?
All the time.
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it really speaks to, how sophisticated computer science is and how powerful, code is.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. You mentioned before, I remember you saying that he also shows how to handle like potential errors.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean?
So that's a really important part of this
Yeah.
because, he wants to make sure his program is going to work.
Yeah.
Even if something unexpected happens. Like,
And
what if the user tries to delete a record that doesn't exist?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that could cause problems.
Right. That would throw everything off.
Right.
So to prevent that, he uses something called a try-except block.
Okay.
It's kind of like it's like a safety net in the code
Gotcha.
to catch errors to prevent the whole program from crashing.
So it's like having a backup plan.
Exactly, a backup plan.
Yeah.
So in the try block, it tries to delete the record.
Yeah.
But in the except block, that's where it handles the error.
Oh.
So like if it can't find the record,
Yeah,
it'll go to that except block
I see. Yeah.
and be like, okay, we couldn't find this record.
It's like having a team that knows how to like adapt to the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really smart.
And that's really important for, any kind of programming you do, not just deleting records from binary files.
Right.
But that idea of error handling
Mhm.
is really important for making sure that your software
Yeah.
is robust, it's reliable, it can withstand, different situations.
This is so interesting.
Yeah.
It's really like making me realize that even something that seems so simple on the surface,
Right.
like, oh, delete a record,
Right.
there's so much more to it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just hitting delete.
Yeah.
It's this whole process
It is.
with all these implications.
a
And
big implication.
yeah, for how the data is managed and security and all these things,
Yeah.
and potentially even recovering it,
Right.
which is crazy.
Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole that we could go down.
It's a deep dive,
It is.
right? That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing.
And you know what? I think what's really interesting too is this whole idea connects to a bigger theme of like data persistence.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So we tend to think of deleting data as like, it's gone, it's disappeared, right?
Yeah.
It's like, poof, vanished.
Right.
But as we've seen, that's not always the case.
Right.
Data can leave traces, it can leave fragments, it can leave shadows.
Yeah.
Even after it's been, intentionally removed, it's kind of like that saying, you can't unring a bell, right?
Right.
Once data is created and it's out there, it has a certain level of persistence.
Yeah.
Even if it's not, directly visible or accessible.
So it's like, even if we think we've deleted something completely,
Right.
it still might exist in some form somewhere.
Right. It might be lurking in the shadows.
That's kind of creepy, but also fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of both.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to keep in mind. It is. It is. It's something to be aware of in this digital age, for sure.
Yeah, and that makes you think about like the long-term implications
Oh, absolutely.
of all the data that we're creating
Yeah.
and storing constantly. Like, wow.
Yeah, because you think, I delete something, it's gone.
Right.
But is it really?
Right.
And that's a whole other, can of worms we could open up.
Yeah, well, and it makes you think about like data privacy
Right.
and security
Right.
and all that, if it's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, who has access to it? How do we make sure it's being handled responsibly?
Right. All those ethical questions come up.
Absolutely.
It's wild. So it seems like, I don't know, deleting something is just like...
It's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's just the beginning of like really understanding how complex all this data management stuff is.
It's like a whole hidden world.
Yeah, totally.
That most people don't even think about.
Right. And, it's really interesting, this whole idea of deleting records from binary files.
Yeah.
It connects to this broader idea of data persistence.
Yes, exactly.
What do you mean by that?
So we often think of deleting data as making it disappear completely.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's gone.
Yeah.
But as we've seen in this deep dive, that's not always the case, right?
Right.
Data can leave these traces,
Yeah.
these fragments, these shadows, even after it's been intentionally removed.
So you're saying even though we might think we've deleted something permanently, it might not actually be gone.
Exactly. And that's something to keep in mind as we navigate this digital world.
Yeah, because we operate under this assumption that like if we hit delete, it's gone.
Poof, it's gone.
But that's not necessarily true.
Not necessarily.
It's almost like data has a life of its own.
In a way, it does.
Even after we think we've erased it.
Right, and that raises all sorts of questions about, long-term implications of the data we create and store every day.
It really does.
Like, where does it all go?
Yeah. Who has access to it?
Yeah, exactly.
All these things, yeah.
It's a bit of a mystery, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And it's kind of a little bit unsettling too when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We have.
So to kind of wrap things up, what are some of the key takeaways that you would want listeners to walk away with from this deep dive?
So I think first and foremost, we have to remember that deleting data, whether it's from binary files or just digital systems in general,
Right.
it's often more nuanced than it seems.
Yeah.
It's not always about complete erasure,
Right.
but it's about, strategically manipulating and reorganizing information.
Like rearranging those train cars.
Exactly, like rearranging the train cars.
Not making them disappear.
Not making them disappear, right?
Right.
And that has, implications for data recovery, security, and, potentially unintended consequences.
Right.
Data can persist in ways that we might not even expect.
Yeah.
So it's just crucial to be mindful of how we create, store, and manage information in this digital world.
And it's fascinating how this seemingly simple concept of deleting a record leads to all these deeper questions about data persistence, privacy,
Absolutely.
and the ethics of data management.
It really does.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And it highlights how, technology is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And our understanding of how to manage data responsibly needs to evolve along with it.
Well said. Well said. I think this has given us all a lot to think about.
It has.
It's amazing how exploring something like, deleting records from binary files can spark so many like thought-provoking questions and insights. So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
Think about the data that you interact with every day and how it's managed
Right.
and stored. And
Yeah.
always remember, even though data might seem kind of ephemeral,
Yeah.
it often has a life of its own,
It does.
even after we think it's gone.
Very well said.
So until next time,
Keep diving deep.
keep diving deep.
It really does, right? And it kind of makes you wonder, like, what are the long-term implications of all the data we generate and store every single day?
Right. Like it's almost like, even though we might intend to delete something permanently,
Yeah.
there's no guarantee that it's actually gone.
There's no guarantee. And it brings up, questions about data privacy and security and the ethics of all of this.
Absolutely.
If data persists even after we try to delete it, who has access to that?
Right.
And how can we ensure that it's handled responsibly?
Those are big questions.
They are big questions.
Yeah. And I think, this deep dive has really shined a light on that.
I think so too. Yeah. It's been a really interesting exploration.
It has been. So I guess to wrap things up here, what are some key takeaways that you would want our listeners to walk away with from this deep dive?
I think the biggest one is to remember that, deleting data from binary files or really from any digital system,
Yeah.
it's way more nuanced than it might seem on the surface.
Right.
It's not always about completely erasing something.
Yeah.
It's about strategically manipulating it, reorganizing it.
Like rearranging those train cars.
Exactly, like rearranging those train cars, not making them disappear.
Right.
And that has implications for data recovery, for security, and even for just, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Data can persist in ways that we might not expect.
Right.
So it's crucial to be mindful of how we create, store, and manage all of this information.
Yeah. It's almost like a whole new way of thinking about data.
It is.
We think, oh, I hit delete, it's gone.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it than that.
So much more.
And it was really interesting to see how, even something as seemingly technical as this can lead to these deeper conversations about, data persistence, privacy, the ethics of data management.
And absolutely. It all ties together.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, I think this has given us a lot to ponder.
It has.
It really makes you think. And, for our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Think about the data that you interact with every single day, how it's managed, how it's stored, and just, always remember, even though data might seem kind of fleeting and temporary,
Right.
it often has a life of its own long after we think it's gone.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Well, until next time, keep diving deep, everybody.
Keep diving.